A Vampyre story is an old game. It came out at the end of 2008 and it shows. The game runs in a 4:3 aspect ratio and there is no way to change that. While that does suck, it is likely not going to be your biggest issue. The game is extremely capricious and refuses to work on modern systems without applying a fix. I've actually had this game for many years but never got to playing it. We've all had this happen to us, haven't we? You just find a super cheap game that seems like something you would enjoy, so you go for it and buy it, only to never actually play it. It's kinda sad really, but in this particular case I did play it only several years later. So as I've mentioned, most people can't even get this game to boot up nowadays. I was no exception. It took me a while, but I believe that I figured out how to make it work for all modern configurations. So far it's worked on 3 different PCs for me and I finished it on one of them. So if you want to try it out, I've posted a separate short tutorial which should help you fix this game. You'll find the link to it in the description below. Now that this is out of the way, let's get to the actual reviewing part of this review. The game features both pre-rendered backgrounds and 3D models. That approach appeals to me on a personal level since I have many fond memories of back in the day when I used to play Grim Fandango, which had the same art style. What stands out almost immediately is the game's voice acting. Everything is voice acted and the performances are fantastic. As with many point and click adventures, you have primary actions. Next to the familiar look, take and talk, we also have the ability to fly. This last one allows our protagonist Mona to turn into a bat and fly to various places. All of these actions trigger some sort of comment from Mona and at times from her sidekick bat Frodrick. In order to make the characters more interesting, the devs gave them unique accents. While Mona sounds like a down-to-earth French girl, Frodrick sounds like an Italo-American mafioso from the 60s. At first, I found that to be annoying and totally out of place. What changed my mind, however, was the fact that the game didn't just go for the accent at random. It actually makes tons of jokes, many of which reminiscent of movies such as The Godfather. The game's universe is wacky and our sidekick is not the only one with such an accent. At one point, you have to interact with some rats who speak in the same way.
Who are you?
My name is Frank, although my friends call me Frankie. I'm here with my associates, Sammy, Joey, and Dean. We've been living in this castle for quite some time. You might say we manage the neighborhood.
How you doing, Frankie?
Hey, look, yous guys, it's the Frodmeister. I told you about him. This crazy guy could do things with his calcar that would make your head spin. You still do that trick, eh, Frody?
Oh, no, Frankie. I've sort of stopped doing stuff like that. I'm laying off the vino now, staying clean, if you know what I mean.
Forget about it. Yo, hey, sorry to hear about the thing with Rocco. You know, he's still looking for you. He and the Belfry boys are still pretty steamed up. You better make it right, and soon. Capiche?
And what about you? Looks like you got yourself a full-on rat pack.
Don't be a wise guy. You trying to be some kind of comedian or something?
Nah, I really think of myself as more of a short, one-eyed song and dance man.
Please forgive him.
Forget about it.
Not only is the game humorous, but the humor is almost exclusively designed with a mature audience in mind. This doesn't mean that most jokes are dirty though. While there are a few here and there, the majority of the jokes simply address issues which would still fly over a child's head, but will definitely draw a smile on the face of an adult. I will give you an example, but must warn any gentle souls who have somehow gotten lost on my channel to stop watching this video beforehand, since this game comes from a time when jokes did not have to be politically correct. So if you are easily offended by silly jokes, etc., now is your time to run and turn this video off.
Anyone listening? I think I better go before I do something that I'll regret.
Don't worry, baby.
Don't,
You can
silly
do
dwarf
whatever you
kids.
want.
Will you?
I promise.
Oh,
I
better
won't
not.
regret it
I'd
after.
rather be stuck in here than wake them up. Too bad Inky ate our mace. I have a desire to bury it in the top of his head. Darn it! Hello, out there? Something has fallen in front of the door.
What are you?
I am your worst nightmare come true. A woman with power. Not political or social power, but black magic, which has power nonetheless.
No, please don't. I'll do anything you ask. Just don't start voting.
Then do this. Be a good husband to your wife and treat her fairly. If I find out that you have said so much as a single insult, I'm going to come back here and finish you off.
As you can see, the game features tons of humor and doesn't ever take itself seriously. It actually made me laugh a few times, which was such a refreshing experience. I also like the fact that our protagonist will often swear in French when things don't quite work out the way she expected. The game's story is another great thing about it. In short, Mona used to be an opera singer in Paris, but was abducted by Baron Shroudy von Kiefer, who's not only a vampire himself, but also turns Mona into one and keeps her locked up in his castle. What I find especially entertaining is that Mona will refuse to acknowledge that she's a vampire and will always try to somehow argue against it, even when others confront her about her many vampiric traits. The story is not the best, but combined with the fantastic voice acting and excellent humor, it makes for a very enjoyable experience. It seemed that the developers really cared about Mona's character and went out of their way to preserve it. While she can transform into a bat, she is a highborn lady and thus prefers to walk. She will refuse to do it unless the game actually wants you to do it to advance. She will also refuse certain interactions because they are beneath her. This is where her bat Froderick comes in play. He's not only here to crack jokes and tease her, but can actually be very useful. It's a well-designed sidekick all in all, and they have a very good dynamic between each other. I also like how Mona won't simply take anything she finds, but rather remembers some items for later. This means that she won't carry an infinite amount of items as you see in many other games, especially the larger ones are kind of weird when the characters just put them in their coat. But instead, in the case of a vampire story, these larger items will appear as a blue memory in your inventory. When you figure out where the item is needed, you will watch a short animation of Mona turning into a bat and going over to pick up that item and then use it. While this mechanic helps the immersion additionally, it comes at a price, since you will have to watch these scenes every time you want to use large items, which slows down the game's pacing. Luckily, this doesn't happen too often, so it's kind of okay. Unfortunately, I have to address a more serious issue here. Whenever Mona moves from one scene to another, you have a short fade to black, which probably serves to hide a loading screen. The problem is that some loading screens are much worse than others, with a few of them taking over 10 seconds. So you'll be looking at this black screen for 10 seconds or more. And you have to consider that the game is installed on my NVMe SSD. I can only imagine how much worse it would be on a normal hard disk. I mean, for example, take a look at this scene transition. Another thing I have to criticize is the fact that the game features several keyboard shortcuts which are never explained anywhere. I only found out about them by chance while reading a guide on the internet. Among them is the most important one. Holding tab reveals all the hotspots on your screen. I suspect that when this game was on a CD, it came with a manual which explained all of this. Back in those days, people were still reading manuals after all. But unfortunately, if you go for a digital version, you really don't get this information in any way, unless you find it by chance like I did. And it's kind of important, especially if you want to play the game without reading any kind of walkthrough or guides. Now let's talk about the game's puzzles. While I don't think that they are nearly as outrageous as in some other games of this genre, they were still way too much for me. I have to admit though that I usually use guides when playing such games. I simply don't like investing hours into just interactions with every possible hotspot or trying to combine every possible item with another. It's not fun for me. Regardless, I believe that people who are good at these kind of games will have no issues figuring most of the puzzles out without external help. I did not experience any bugs or other issues with the game once I got it working. One funny thing did happen though. As I was playing the game, I encountered one of Mona's voice lines, which was weirdly recorded without her French accent. It sounds so different that I actually assumed another character came out of nowhere and started talking or something. Take a listen for yourself.
This looks like one of Shouty's old coloring books. It has a picture of a newt in it. Glad to see he was at least a normal child.
Except he did this as an adult. This is fresh crayon, and that's a new box.
Oh dear.
I have a theory about it. If you ask me, Mona was initially not supposed to be French, and this is an older recording which then slipped through and was not noticed. It also shows us that the French accent actually makes Mona much more likable. So if this was her true accent, I think that the switch was a good idea. it definitely makes her more appealing to the player. The game took me about 12.5 hours to complete, and right at the end, the game's biggest flaw comes into light. It actually ends on a cliffhanger. Unfortunately, the game was a commercial failure. Only 30 to 35,000 copies were sold, which was way below the expected 80,000. It's a really sad thing because the developers clearly knew they had made a good game. They were so confident that the story was never finished and intentionally set up to be a game that requires a sequel. I can only imagine how disappointed they must have been with the sales, because to be quite honest, this game is objectively really good, especially for its time and genre. There have been several mentions of a sequel and even a prequel, but those are stuck in development hell and will probably never happen. I can't tell you how much this saddens me because the game is very enjoyable. I would have loved to see more of Mona's adventures. In addition to that, this makes it harder to recommend. It literally cuts in the middle of the story. There is no conclusion of any kind here. The player is left asking for more, but simultaneously having to accept the fact that there simply isn't going to be any more of it. And this isn't even its biggest problem. The main issue, in my opinion, is its price, at least as it stands right now. I don't remember anymore how much I paid back in the day for this game, but it was certainly less than the price of an average sandwich. Currently, the only place I can see this game available for purchase is Steam, and the price there is €20, which is simply absurd. GOG doesn't even have it at all, which surprises me. So here's my suggestion to anyone who would love to try this game. Keep an eye on it, and once available at a low price, get it. Then be sure to watch my 2-minute instructional video on how to get it working on modern systems, and you are golden. If you are looking for a similar game for now while waiting for a vampire story, you could go with Fandango Remastered. I love that game and it's still fantastic today. I finished it at least 4 times in my life, one of which on my PlayStation Vita, and anywhere I play it, it's just a great fun. It's so enjoyable. Its story is actually quite unique and a lot better than this one, for example, and when I think about it, it's overall the superior game. It's a must play for anyone who enjoys the point and click genre. That should help you fill the time until a vampire story gets a more reasonable price, and once that happens, give it a shot. It's worth it. This has been my review of a vampire story. I hope you found it entertaining. Be sure to check out my Patreon, where I post links to free games whenever I find them. The links are all public, so no need to donate anything in order to see them. But if you can and want to support my work, you can do so there as well. In any case, thank you for watching and have a great day.
Yes, well, now that the constable is, resting quietly, I'll take my coffin back to Madame Strigoi camp.